Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hackers' Misadventures in Scale Modeling. Today we're going to actually look at two videos. I'm specifically looking at two aircraft that spelt the demise of the Curtiss Aircraft Company. Now, the reason I'm doing that is the first one we're watching is about the XF14C. But I'm also going to be looking at the XF87 Blackhawk, which was a night fighter. That one is a little shorter than this one, but combine the two, I could kill two birds with one stone, because I was debating about whether I was going to do this one and the other one, or just do the one. But seeing the one is really actually a very short video, I decided to include them both. And of course, I'll have your models that are available for these aircraft. So let's have a look and see what we got here.
In my previous video on the P-51C Horse, I talked about how the US Navy, though swearing off liquid-cooled inline engines in 1921, did keep a close eye on developments on those types of power plant. In the late 1930s,
Let me try that again.
51C Horse, I talked about how the US Navy, though swearing off liquid-cooled inline engines in 1921, did keep a close eye on developments on those types of power plant. In the late 1930s, there looked to be a few prospects that seemed promising enough that the Navy planners thought they might be worth putting some investments into. Amongst these was the Lycoming XH2470. Like many other aero engine manufacturers of the 1930s, Lycoming was scrambling to stay ahead of the competition as aircraft engines became increasingly powerful in that decade. In 1933, Lycoming had begun work on an engine, designated as the O1230, that looked to be what today we might describe as a disruptive technology, a 12-cylinder liquid-cooled engine that produced 1,200 horsepower. But what made this new engine special was that in contrast to most rival designs, the O1230 was a horizontally opposed or flat design that made it potentially more aerodynamic, especially if mounted in an aircraft's wings. In fact, despite considerable investment in the development of this engine by the United States Army Air Corps, the engine was problematic and abandoned. But Lycoming weren't about to give up completely with the concept, and so in 1938 they began work on a design that coupled two of the O1230s together to form a 24-cylinder H-block type that would theoretically produce 2,300 horsepower. The Lycoming XH2470. This was potentially a huge deal in the late 1930s for future military aircraft, and both the USAAC and the United States Navy invested in the new power plant's development. At the time, the US Navy had only just started to receive the first of their Brewster F-2 fighters into service, as well as placing orders for the Grumman F-4F Wildcat, but they were already planning on the next generation of fighters for their carrier fleet. And the new, hugely powerful engine, which produced almost twice the horsepower of the F-4F's twin-wasp radial, seemed like an excellent prospect. On the 30th of June 1941, the US Navy placed orders for their next generation of naval fighters, the F-6F Hellcat and the F-7F Tigercat twin-engine heavy fighter. What isn't so well remembered was that they also ordered a third aircraft, a theoretically formidable new naval interceptor that, in a break from their avowed tradition, would use the liquid-cooled engine that they had invested in, the Curtiss XF14C. Now I shall say right away that all of the pictures of the XF14C you see in this video are of the later XF14C2 model. And the reason for that is because the Lycoming 24-cylinder engine, spoiler alert, never worked out. To be fair to Lycoming, coupling engines like this was an idea that basically every major aircraft producing country at the time was giving serious consideration to. and indeed some H-block types were able to eventually get into service, though the vast majority proved to be costly failures. In fact, quite a number of the forgotten aircraft I've covered
Next
owe their
aircraft I'm
demise
going to do
to
is
the
the
optimism
Manchester
placed in
at some
H-block
point.
engine development and their subsequent mishaps. But to return to the XF14C. Of all-metal construction and
Kind of an
equipped
ugly
with folding
plane.
wings, the XF14C was planned to have initially 6 50 caliber Browning heavy machine guns in the wings as armament, which was later changed to 4 20mm cannon. This all might seem pretty conventional, but the chosen propeller was not, as the idea was to fit a contra-rotating prop on the aircraft. Curtiss projections were that the aircraft would have a top speed of 374 miles per hour, with an initial climb rate of 2,810 feet per minute. But the Navy's own wind test tunnels of the design led them to conclude that Curtiss was being somewhat optimistic with their assessments. Regardless, things progressed until October
Optimistic.
1943, when, with the first of the 2 ordered prototypes just about finished, the unavoidable problem arose in the fact that the Lycoming engine was not actually available for fitting on the aircraft. After a couple of months of wrangling, the Navy dumped the Lycoming H-block and decided to fit a radial engine that was in keeping with their general philosophy on naval aircraft power plants instead. Having said that, the engine they chose was certainly a beast, a turbo-supercharged variant of the Wright R3350 duplex Cyclone, the engine famously used on the B-29 Super Fortress.
That's a big engine.
This engine, though bulkier than the Lycoming, could produce 2,250 horsepower and was ideally suited for high-altitude combat, leading the Navy to decide that the new aircraft, now designated as the XF14C-2, might make a high-altitude fighter. To be honest, it seems that the Navy was just double-checking that they weren't missing out on something special, because by this point, the F6F Hellcat, which remember had been ordered at the same time as the XF14C, was carving its legend across the skies of the Pacific as one of the great carrier fighters. The XF14C, however, was never going to be that. Curtiss were able to make the necessary changes reasonably quickly, and the XF14C-2 was even fitted with contra-rotating propellers. But when it was handed over to the Navy for flight tests in September 1944, it proved to be rather disappointing. Top recorded speed was 398 miles per hour at 32,000 feet, which wasn't anything special considering the other aircraft in development at the time. Additionally, the propeller system caused the aircraft to shudder to an alarming degree. This late in the war, the US Navy was of the opinion that they no longer really needed a high-altitude fighter, and that their existing designs, as well as the newer ones that were coming into service imminently, were more than sufficient for their needs. So they cancelled the XF-14C. Curtiss launched another proposal for an XF-14C3, which would have had a pressurized cockpit and the ability, allegedly, of being able to operate at up to 40,000 feet. The Navy paid for studies to be carried out on this until early 1945, but soon concluded once again that they had no need for this type, and then pulled the plug completely on the project, leaving the one and only XF-14C2 to head for the scrapyard. And that would be that, except for the fact that this aircraft, along with the XP-60, were the last piston engine fighters built by Curtiss, a company that had been at the cutting edge of aviation development since the earliest days of the aeroplane. In fact, the XF-14C represents the sort of issues that had been besetting Curtiss since the 1930s. The company was struggling to stay innovative, especially in comparison to other companies like North American and Bell. Plus, it is arguable that the company was a victim of its own success in that it ended up with far more work than it could comfortably handle during the war, leading to issues in quality control and development. And where Curtiss did try to innovate, which in the case of the XF-14C was represented in betting on a novel power plant and propeller system, that gamble ultimately proved to be a poor one. As a result, the end of the war saw Curtiss, despite being ranked second in terms of the value of contracts awarded to it during the conflict, rapidly fall by the wayside, with the company leaving aircraft production completely in 1948, and the XF14C as an almost completely forgotten aircraft.
Yeah, well, okay, let's switch this thing here for a minute. That's going to be my next video, the one that put the nail in the coffin for Curtiss, right? But while I'm on the subject of the current one, I have found a small video to add on to this. It has a few interesting pictures of the aircraft, and it also gives you information how to get a PDF file on this aircraft. So if I can go back again here. Okay. This is called retro mechanics. So I've happened to come across this one when I was looking for additional information on kits of this aircraft. Now, according to this down here, you can be on their newsletter, and you can be on this newsletter, and you can buy the e-books, and they have back issues of this. But in here, I'm looking for I saw it. See, it says here, right here, the PDF is 38 pages long with 37 photos. I kind of would be interested in that one. They have the Wildcat, the F-89 Scorpion, and a couple others. So let's go back to here, and I'm just going to run what is pertinent to the thing. Now, I turned the sound off on this because it's got music, and I don't know if it's got copyright or not, but you can barely hear the music anyway. So let's have a look here. See, very interesting. See, this is the pictures you would get in the PDF file. I probably would be interested, but not for a bit till I get my shop back up and running again, because I'm still trying to find new digs. So now we'll go over to the other video I'm putting in here. This one, first one was from Nash's Military Matters. Nash's Military Matters. This one is from a site called A Short History, which out of the two documentaries I found on YouTube, this one was about the most interesting. It gives you a little bit better explanation. So, okay, there we go. So let's listen to this one. This one's rather short. So this is the aircraft that finally killed Curtiss, which is sad. Sad to see Glenn Curtiss's company end in 48, but he died before then, so his legacy didn't succeed into the future. Anyways, let's have a look.
The Curtiss-Wright XF87 Blackhawk, originally designated the XP87, was an American all-weather jet fighter interceptor. It was developed to replace the P-61 Black Widow as a night fighter and interceptor aircraft. However, the XF87 lost the competition against the Northrop F-89 Scorpion. This forced Curtiss-Wright to close down its aviation division.
See.
In 1945, the U.S. Army Air Forces issued a requirement for a jet-powered all-weather fighter. Curtiss-Wright had already begun work on an attack aircraft, designated the XA-43. This design was reworked to fit the new requirement. The reworked design was designated the XP-87. It was a large mid-wing aircraft, with 4 engines paired in underwing pods. It had a tricycle undercarriage. 2 crew members were placed side by side. The intention was to fit a nose-mounted powered turret, containing 4 20mm cannons, but the prototypes were armed with 4 fixed 20mm cannons. When the U.S. Air Force was newly formed, the XP-87 was redesignated the XF-87. The first flight of the XF-87 took place March 5, 1948. The performance was deemed acceptable, but the top speed was slower than expected. A month later, the Air Force ordered 57 F-87A fighters and 30 F-87A reconnaissance aircraft. The prototypes were fitted with Westinghouse XJ-34WE-7 turbojets, but because of the performance problems, the production models were to use the more powerful General Electric J-47 turbojets. The intention was to modify one of the prototypes as a testbed for the new engines. However, after evaluation, the U.S. Air Force considered the Northrop F-89 Scorpion a more interesting option than the XF-87. The order for production aircraft was cancelled October 10, 1948. Only 2 prototyped XF-87s were constructed, and when the production order was cancelled, the prototypes were scrapped. This was a hard blow to Curtiss-Wright's aviation division, which had to close down. The XF-87 became its last aircraft project.
And like I said, it was short, and thus ends the Curtiss-Wright. Now I might do one more on their hell diver at the end of the war, because it, from what I understand, it had a few problems that didn't help in the interest of Curtiss-Wright, Curtiss's bottom line. So what do we got for models? Well, let's see. Now, for the XF14C, we have only one model, no, 2 models. We got one model from Adrian. It's Indigrand, sorry. It's a resin kit, not very many pieces to it. And the other model is from Unicraft Models. So those are the only 2 models you got of that aircraft. Now for the XF87, we have at least 3 models. We have a vacuum form model from XU-Form. So we got that aircraft, and then that's vacuum form. Then we got 2, another one from Endigran, which is a resin kit, and one more from a company called Pro Resin, and that was that for that one. Now, I looked to see if there was any 1/48 scale and 1/32 scale kits, whether they're mold injection resin or vacuum form, and I didn't find any. So those are the only kits of these aircraft. Very obscure aircraft, but somebody did make a kit. So that is that on Curtiss Wright. Like I said, I might do the Helldiver because I'm going to look into watching a video about how it was actually a poor design that the Navy chose. But we'll go from there. Anyways, well, I hope you enjoyed that video. And please remember to subscribe to my channel and punch that like button. You also can donate to my channel through my PayPal, which is on the main page of my channel. And you also can donate through Patreon. So, as always, every build is an adventure, so go make it awesome. And we'll see you again later. And you have a good day. Goodbye.